Shaped by Sound combines performance and conversation to capture the depth of the North Carolina music scene. Superchunk is an indie rock institution within the Triangle music scene. Back in 1989, two of their members founded the label Merge Records to release and promote the band's own music. And over the years, Merge became very successful, and Superchunk did too. But despite that growth in time, their trademark frenetic energy is at the center of each show. Today on the Shaped by Sound podcast, we're in conversation with Mac and Jim from Superchunk. Mac, Jim from Superchunk, thank you so much for being on Shaped by Sound.
How's it going?
Thank you.
It's going well. Now, you both live in Durham or Chapel Hill?
I live in Durham.
Yeah.
I live in Chapel Hill.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Competitors.
Yep. Just over the border.
Well, at the end of my street, it says, "Welcome to Chapel Hill." So it's sort of like, you know.
So you can pick and choose maybe which ones you.
Jim's got a foot in both worlds.
Yeah.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've got a tax base in one and a social life in the other. You know.
That must be nice.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start out by kind of jumping into, Mac, you're from Raleigh, right?
I grew up in Durham.
Okay. And what was that, like, as you were kind of growing up here in North Carolina, what was the music scene like for you, and kind of how were you influenced by it?
When my family moved to Durham in 1981, and my previous experience, which was in South Florida, was a world of, mainstream like rock radio, album rock radio, which was pretty different then than it is now, in the sense that you could hear, a song by The Clash or Patti Smith or something on the same station as Molly Hatchet or whatever else was on the radio then. But when we moved to North Carolina, it was a whole different world in terms of what you could hear on the radio, which at age 13, that's pretty much the only access to music that I had. And college radio was really the reason for that, XDU and XYC and KNC, when you could pick it up, were just playing all kinds of music that I'd never heard before. And, of course, in addition to that, there were, once we got older, there were clubs, sometimes shows at Duke and UNC that we could go to because they weren't in bars. But, we couldn't really go to the Cat's Cradle or anything until we got a little bit older. But, some of the venues like the Cat's Cradle are still around.
Of course.
Obviously, the radio stations are still around. And there was a lot of great record stores.
Yeah.
Which would, of course, stock all the national titles that were coming out, but were supportive of local music as well.
What was the Cat's Cradle like back then?
Cat's Cradle, the first time, when I first started going there, which at first was essentially trying to sneak into shows and hope that no one would notice. Like, I would sometimes go like early and just hope that I wouldn't get kicked out for being.
Did you have a fake ID?
15 or whatever. I actually didn't have one at that point.
Yeah. We won't tell anybody.
And sometimes, you could talk to them about, can my parent be like a chaperone or whatever? And sometimes that would work. Sometimes you could just watch sound check and then you'd have to leave, like that kind of thing. But it was in a space on Franklin Street. I don't even know what that space is now because it's changed a couple times. I think it's Ceramics Place or something like that.
Is it like where the bookstore was?
It was next to the bookstore. Next to the bookshop on Franklin.
It was tiny.
Yeah, it was maybe like 2 or 250 capacity. But
do you remember who you were seeing in there?
Yeah, so once I got into a band in high school, a band called Pneumatic Underground. Like we got to play there a couple of times, opening for. We opened for like Tommy Keene. We got to open for, I think, the Pressure Boys there at a certain point. But that's who we were going to see, was bands like the Pressure Boys, who were local, and often they were opening for a touring act. And I remember this must have been an all ages show, because I remember seeing the Violent Femmes there on their first big tour that came through. Violent Femmes, Joe King Carrasco, Tommy Keene, as I said. The Replacements were a show that I could only watch a couple songs because my band was playing the same night at Rhythm Alley on Rosemary Street, though that Replacements show is notoriously shambolic one, which I don't think they ended up finishing. But one of my more memorable times was I wanted to go see the Meat Puppets. They were touring on Meat Puppets 2, which they were playing on XYZ and stuff.
Yeah.
And I knew I couldn't really get in, so I was hanging around outside, and the Meat Puppets were just loading in. And they said, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I can't get in because I'm not old enough." They're like, "Here, carry these guitars. You can just like pretend to be one of our roadies." But of course,
How cool.
the people at the door, Billy, who was working the door, like knew me. So I felt a hand on my shoulder as I tried to walk past with one of the with carrying guitars. And again, I think I got to watch a couple songs, but couldn't actually stay for the show. But I mean, they just had like so many great bands playing there. The Hoodoo Gurus on their first album tour was one of the most memorable shows I saw there.
Wow. And Jim, who are you listening to kind of growing up?
Emerson, Lake and Palmer,
Yeah.
Steely Dan, Bruce Springsteen, and then quickly Minor Threat,
Nice.
Husker Du, Minutemen, Replacements, all the classic punk rock of the early '80s.
Yeah. That's pretty incredible. And feel like so Jim, you were living in Massachusetts?
I lived in Connecticut.
Connecticut. Okay.
And I met Mac in college. Basically, that's a long story short. And
Were you both in Columbia?
no, I was in Connecticut.
Okay.
And I would go to New York to visit my friend who was his roommate or lived on the same floor in the dorm. And that's how we became friends. And my first time coming down to Chapel Hill, I was just like, wow, this is where I want to be, you know, like, because where I grew up, I mean, there was nothing there. I mean, it was beautiful, but there was no real culture.
Yeah.
But it's what I kind of, what I wanted, what I was, hungry for. So.
And Jim mentioned, punk rock, and at the age I was talking about where it was hard to get into clubs, the one place you could go see bands was all ages shows. Mm-hmm. And actually Raleigh was more likely to have all ages shows at a club like the Brewery. Mm-hmm. They had shows in like a roller skating rink over there where I think Black Flag played. And they, Duke campus in Durham actually did have some all ages shows at the Coffee House. So there were all ages shows that was more like hardcore bands.
Gotcha. It seems like that kind of is a trend throughout, no matter like what generation it is. Like even when I was growing up, like for me to get into a younger show, it was like hardcore, or like I guess emo would have been then. But yeah, it seems like kind of the same in a way. Jim, so like when Mac brought you down, like what was it like? What was drawing you in? Like what was so exciting for you?
I mean, it was just the availability and the access of music, of the music scene. I mean, there were clubs, there was a street where people were walking on it, going places, and availability of the culture that that resonated with me by reading about it in fanzines and books and hearing about it. But it always just seemed to be kind of like this mythical place that just didn't really exist. And then, getting out of the car on Franklin Street in 1985 or something, it was eye-opening. And, I mean, yeah.
And Mac, what brought you? What made you want to bring him down here?
Oh, he had no say in the matter. We were a big group of people.
Yeah.
It was sort of again, we all met up north in New York and Connecticut, and but for me at least, staying in New York after college wasn't really an option in terms of whatever kind of job I could have gotten at that point. And I was part of this music scene down here. I wanted to come back and play music and be around my friends and live here. So there was just sort of this migration down here. Jim and a couple other friends from up north also moved down at different times and lived down here. It was cheap to live here at that time, and you could play music in your living room and or in your garage or whatever. And it was an easy place to be.
It definitely was cheap. I mean, that's the thing that it's hard to explain to to the youngsters now. But
Right.
it was very affordable. And because I was a high school teacher before, in Connecticut, which the suburbs of New York City, it was not cheap,
Right.
So it's a different world.
Right. So we kind of, the landscape supported the artist.
Yeah.
Maybe, in a way. Because it's funny, it's not really funny, but I look back on when you all were in Chapel Hill and starting to play music and playing music with all these people, and it just seems like this incredible creative playground. And I want to know for you all what that was like as artists, as creators at a young age. What was that like to be there in that time?
I mean, it was fun. I think when you're in it, you're just kind of doing your life. You're working at the pizza place, you're working at Kinko's, you're playing in bands, you're going to see other bands at house parties and things like that. It's if you're finished with school, even though you have a job now, it kind of feels like, oh, this is a new part of your life, because while you have obligations, they're not the same kind of obligations that you had when you were growing up.
Right.
And so it's I think that's part of kind of a crucial thing to be oh, I can design my life around, playing music if I want to. It may not last forever, but that's, I'm at a point where I don't mind living in a house with a bunch of other people. I don't mind having this kind of job as the only job that will allow me to go on tour, that kind of thing. And so it's kind of the time in your life when you can do that. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah. Did you feel like you were onto something, or as a group there was something happening that was special? No?
I would say no, not really. I mean, like he said, when it's just when you're living in that moment, you don't have the luxury of the future to look back at. You just, you're just there. And
yeah. You just want to go to your job, make a few bucks, and go hang out with your friends and play music?
Yeah, and it was nice that there was some interest. There was enough interest to play a show and have people show up, but it wasn't oh my God, we've made it.
That was kind of the dream, to play music and have people be there to watch it. That's the thing, even if you're talking 50 people or something.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that maybe we recognized at the time, or were striving for at the time, was that we had, again, like Jim was saying, from reading and fanzines and things, or listening to the radio or going to see bands from other places, we did have some role models in a sense of there's this scene in Washington, D.C., and they have this label that puts out local bands. There's this scene in Minneapolis. There's this scene in Boston. And you could kind of see these other places, which are admittedly much larger places,
right,
but think to yourself we could have kind of a cool thing like that here, Mm-hmm. And I think that if you were going to see bands in someone's basement, and the bands you're seeing are Polvo or Erectus Monotone or whoever, really good bands, you're thinking, wow, there is something going on.
Right. Kind of feeding off of that a bit, when the scene that you all were in, and as it started to develop throughout the 90s, and it started to maybe leak outside of the Triangle into North Carolina and just sort of Southeast at large, what was it like for you all in a band that was kind of breaking into a larger audience?
I mean, we were on tour. You might be describing it kind of backwards for us, because we were leaving town to go play. We were playing all over the country pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. We were lucky because we hooked up with a booking agent who was well established and had the juice to get us on tours and get us into clubs and get us in front of people.
Right.
So we were gone a lot, and we'd come home, and you come home and you just want to rest. And there were still things were going on here, but I felt somewhat disconnected from it a lot of the time, just because we were gone so much.
Yeah.
So you would read about it.
There's whole eras that we missed.
Yeah.
Because you guys were on tour.
Yeah. But I think that like there was a slight feeling when people started to write articles about Chapel Hill as the next whatever.
Right.
That felt a little like, oh, someone needs a story.
They need content.
And so they're going to like kind of gin up this idea, even though, yes, all these bands were here, but as a band that was here, having it be described back to you from the outside felt kind of phony, you know? But at the same time, we're adults, like we can recognize, like, well, that's just what magazines do, and that's what music papers write about is that kind of thing, scenes or whatever.
Right.
So you understand the need for that kind of story to exist because they can't keep writing about Seattle or Austin or whatever. But it did feel a little bit like you're trying to like fit a square peg in a round hole kind of thing, just to have a story. So I think that we looked at that with a little skepticism,
Right.
You know,
A jaundiced eye.
yes, that's what I always said that.
Yeah.
I always said that at the time.
So for you all then, was it just a nice place to be back home and rest and like just take time off and play and maybe have creative space and liberty to do whatever you wanted?
Oh, for me, yes, yeah.
Yeah, I think that when we were home was when we could work on new music. I mean, we were making records pretty often and touring a lot for each one. So when we were home, it was time to write new songs, but also, sure, like work in the record store and go see other bands and hang out with friends and stuff.
Yeah. It seemed like you were all also making music videos together. Because when we were kind of trying to understand a little bit more of the aesthetic for what we wanted to do with the stage for the show, you sent us over a ton of amazing music videos, and you had a lot of them from that time. What was it like to do that? I feel like you were in almost the heyday of MTV, really, when things like that were on television. So, I mean, it seems like that was another creative outlet for you.
It was almost like you had to make music videos in order to become known outside of your area because MTV, but again, not that a video by a band like ours would get played on MTV proper. We would get played on the one show that came on at like midnight and lasted for 2 hours once a week. So, but that's the reach of MTV. MTV was such that it was worth it to have a video on 120 minutes in that time slot, you know. So, and then if we knew that band that we knew was going to have a video on, like we would watch, 120 minutes just to see like what are they playing. So you kind of had to make videos, but we were really lucky. I don't think any of us was like,
no,
let's make a video. But we were lucky that we knew creative people like Norwood Cheek and Phil Morrison and Peyton Reed, friends of ours, Alan Hervey, friends of ours who knew how to do that and wanted to do that for bands from around here.
Right.
And so we had amazing partners in that. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah. And they went on to create some very successful things independently, right?
Of course, yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Also want to touch a little bit on, so Mac, obviously you're a co-owner of Merge Records, just turned 35.
Yeah.
So you have sort of a unique perspective on the music industry as a musician and as a co-owner of a label. As the methods of delivery for music has sort of evolved over time, how have you as artists sort of changed with it?
I don't know that we've really changed what we do in response to how music is consumed. I mean, I think that maybe everyone made kind of albums that were too long once CDs came out because they're like, you can make an album that's 60 minutes long, and so we have some records that are kind of long. But now we're back to like 33 minutes, which is like kind of the ideal length for a record. But no, I think that maybe it's just because we've been doing this for a long time. Like we don't really change how we approach the music part of it based on how people consume it. Now, the rollout for a record or how a record is released, and those things change, for the way labels do things. But as a band, I don't think we've really changed our approach.
Gotcha. I'm wondering too, as far as that goes, as far as the consumption side of it, how do you approach maybe live music now? Is it the same as when you were kind of going through and touring like before?
Kind of feels the same
Yeah.
to me, though. We have a lot more songs to choose from, so it's kind of fun writing a set list now, especially if we have a new record out. Then you're trying to incorporate songs from the new record, of course, but then you have 35 years of other songs to fit into that set list. And, I feel lucky that we can still tour and people will come see us. Mm-hmm. And I think the fact is that a lot of people who come see us have been coming to see us for a long time. It's amazing when we have new fans. I love that. It's great to see young people in our crowds. That's pretty wild considering how old we are. But, I think that it's cool knowing that if you put a song in a set list like you haven't played in a long time or that you've never played or that's just kind of obscure, there'll be people there that will really appreciate that because they've already seen you 10 times in Chicago before or whatever.
Right.
And so there's still something new for them to grab onto.
Right. But what is it like for those people that you can tell are maybe there for the first time?
I mean, you'll have to ask them what it's like.
Oh, what's it for you?
Hopefully.
Well, what's it like for you all? I guess is the question. To see that generation difference.
I mean, it's gratifying. I have images in my head of standing on stage and looking down. This in the last couple of years and seeing 14-year-old kids singing along, to a song that's older than it's weird, but it's it makes you feel like, well, maybe my life hasn't been a complete waste of time. That's all. I mean, it's satisfying. It's humbling too. So.
Yeah, I bet you it's a great feeling.
It's awesome, and I think that for the most part, I think that the internet ruined everything. But
of course.
I think that one thing that's interesting is that, when I think about the bands that I wanted to go see when I was that age, they were mostly, people that were my age or slightly older, a little bit older. I wasn't trying to go see a lot of bands that were putting out records before I was born.
Yeah.
And so the fact that people can discover things now, and we see this with our own kids, discover things now that came out so long ago, but they don't see, because of the way music is presented in the current formats, they don't necessarily draw those same lines between what's super, they don't see old stuff as necessarily that's old dusty records that are just been in my parents' shelf or whatever. I don't need to listen to that. They kind of approach things in a much more egalitarian way, for lack of a better word. It's in the sense of what's old, what's new.
Yeah.
And if they like it, they like it. And to me, that's really cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm definitely one of those people, to be totally honest. I grew up in the age of new digital music. And being able to discover. I didn't have to sift through just my dad's records or my own CDs. There was a whole world of independent artists that I could go into.
I went to see, just as an example, I went to see Built to Spill the other night.
Right.
It was a band that we played shows with in the 90s, and they continue to make great records, and they're awesome. But I was struck that I was one of the older people in that room. And that doesn't happen, very often at a show like that. And I was like, wow, how do these, because it's normally just I feel people the same age as the band that you're seeing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, there's teenagers here singing Built to Spill, which is awesome. And of course, they're amazing. Why wouldn't they be there? But part of me was just how do they even know about this record?
Yeah.
How do they make this connection to this record that came out in 1994?
Right.
You know what I mean? That the band is playing and they're singing all the words.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Do you think it's because, when you say Built to Spill was making that record, they were making it when in their 20s, right? Do you think it's sort of the music kind of connects to the age?
That's possible.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. It's just that normally to me, it's unusual that those kids would reach back to a band that was their age that
Right.
long ago
Yeah.
and still connect to it. You know what I mean? But yeah.
So your album Foolish it's 30 years old now. And I did want to kind of touch on, what is it like now to be, say, like on a world tour? And back then, you all were just making 7-inch records in somebody's, apartment or whatever, just trying to make records and put them out there. What's it like to kind of go back and play these songs and play them all over the world versus, say, at the Cat's Cradle in Chapel Hill?
Oh, I know. We played them all over the world back then too, kind of.
But kind of touching on that again, like it seems like it has just as much relevance now too as it did.
Certain songs on that record are still evergreen.
Yeah.
Or not still. I guess they were popular and they seem to have stayed popular. Or they resonate with the crowd. I mean, it's something you can kind of feel without really understanding. It's like you start certain songs just. When you start playing them, you can feel the mood in the room change, and or the sound level goes up because people
start
are like
walking out, and you're just like, yeah, we shouldn't have played that one.
Oh shoot!
But
yeah.
surely it's not. It's the opposite.
No,
way
I'm
around.
just kidding.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
No, I mean, I've forgotten the question.
Yeah, I guess it's just like
Well, I think to Jim's point, like you feel a reaction in the room when you start playing certain songs. And I think that at this point, again, we've toured so many times and played a lot of these places, even in places kind of far from here. Like we just did a tour, some shows in Spain. Mm-hmm. There's people that saw us back then, in Valencia, for instance. Mm-hmm. But I think that what brings some people out now is that if they see, especially that you're touring for a record that came out when they were a certain age, they're like, oh, that's my favorite record. Like, if I go see them when they're touring for Wild Loneliness, our last record, they might only play one song from Foolish, for instance. But if I see their band's like touring like to celebrate the anniversary of this old record, like I know I'm going to get like the stuff that I want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like one of the aspects of doing a tour like that.
Is it fun to like revisit some of the songs that you maybe normally wouldn't play off of that record?
Yeah, I mean, it's even if it's sometimes it's like, oh, what were we thinking?
Yeah, there's a reason we don't play.
There's a reason why we don't play it. But then you have a chance to kind of maybe tweak it or play it with a slightly different way or something and make it better.
Yeah.
Or like, I mean, it breaks up not the boredom. I said boredom. I don't mean that. That's a negative word. Yeah. But it breaks up the monotony of playing the same songs over and over and over.
We've done it for 30 years.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's good to revisit old ones that maybe got neglected.
Mm-hmm. So within this show, it's called Shaped by Sound, and we kind of want to identify, how music can shape us as people, as communities, and as a state. In what ways do you believe that you are shaped by sound?
It's almost like it's hard to identify because music has been a part of my life since the beginning, in the sense that, we had my parents listen to music in the house, and my grandmother was a piano teacher, and I played in the school band. It's like it's really hard to separate because it's just kind of always there, But I think that in terms of going back that far, I think that one thing that hearing different kinds of music around the house, whether it was, my dad's jazz records or his Led Zeppelin records, is that even if let's say you're 15 years old and you're like not into jazz yet, you're just into like the rock and roll that you love or whatever that you hear on the radio, you've been primed to like be interested in that maybe later on, or like you have like you can like have an ear for something that as you mature you go like, oh, you know what, like those records are really good actually, and I think that is something that is interesting to think about in terms of like what you hear early in your life and then how it comes back to you, later.
Yeah. Jim, do you have a response to that?
It's a difficult question.
It is.
Because of like what Max said. I don't really think about it. You're talking about like the physical experience of hearing things is what it sounds like you're talking about, like sound. How does it shape you? And
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's something that if you're lucky enough to have it, affect you that way, I think it's beyond the it's hard to express what's good about it in words. That's what makes it special is that it's not words, it's sound,
Right.
So the feeling you get from it, it's hard to translate into words for me.
I'm always amazed that, because I think talking to people who were lucky enough to be playing music in a band as something that we do, that we can still do, that's one thing. But I'm always amazed when I meet people and talk to people who sound and music is something that has nothing to do with their job or like what they do all day or like a large part of their life, but it's this other thing that's like, oh, like this is my like retreat, or this is a thing that kind of like saves me from all this other stuff I'm dealing with every day in my life. And so to me, like that is a very powerful aspect of music or connection to bands or music scenes. The people that aren't trying to do it to make a living or because they feel like a calling to like play guitar or something. It's just that like it gives them something that they don't have in the rest of their life.
And it's bigger than entertainment.
Yeah.
It's not just, something to kill time or to, pass a pleasant hour. It actually is some sort of kind of, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say religious, but it fills some sort of space
Right.
in other people's lives.
And I think it's like a human connection.
Yeah.
In the sense that, you can get that, I think, from listening to records, but, I'll travel to go see an artist now that, maybe I think like, oh, this might be the last time I get to see this person play live, and it's usually very gratifying, even if they're not at the peak of their career or they haven't made a record I like in a long time, whatever. It's still just like, oh, like that is that person like 100 feet away that like wrote that song and now they're singing it right there. Like that's kind of like a unique thing with music.
Yeah. There's I had somebody kind of describe it to me as a universal togetherness in a way, where you can tap into somebody else who you've never met before and feel some of the things that they're feeling and hear some of the things that they're trying to say. I guess to your earlier point, Mac, I'm one of those people that, outside of this, I don't write music, I don't make music, but to be at a live show is something that is a feeling that is almost, incredible in a way, because you are able to be amongst total strangers in a dark room and still feel these things and be with each other and be happy that you're there for the most part. Mm-hmm. That's an incredible thing that we have that's sort of untold and unsaid. I want to touch a little bit on that. You both still live in North Carolina. You had chances to move outside of here and live totally opposite lives and do whatever you wanted to do. And I feel like you've really supported a lot of musicians here and other artists. For us as making this music show, I would like to tap into you all as creators and ask you, what would you like to see more of as far as this music here, this thing that we have here? How would you want to celebrate North Carolinian music if you can?
Well, I think that one thing that comes to mind is, we have all these great rock clubs that really, I think, for the most part, treat artists well, and people like playing at these places. We just had we already talked about the Cat's Cradle in Chapel Hill. Of course, we just had the Hopscotch Festival in Raleigh. You could see a lot of different bands in different venues there. We had the Carborough Music Festival yesterday. I went and saw some great bands play behind a coffee shop. Like, you can see bands in a lot of places, I do sometimes wish that the programming at the local universities was more geared towards up-and-coming musicians from North Carolina, and incorporated that more into their, programs of like very prestige programming, but, involved some more North Carolina voices.
Gotcha. It's from like a college radio scene or just from like an academic level?
Well, Carolina Performing Arts and Duke and NC State, I think they all have programs, that bring great artists to play on campus at the various venues.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. It's wild. Like sometimes you just go like, I can't believe I'm sitting in Memorial Hall watching Herbie Hancock or whatever. You know what I mean? Like moments like that.
Yeah.
Or Caetano Veloso or whoever, just people from all over the place. But I think that elevating North Carolina artists to be in that same conversation, I think doesn't happen as often as it could maybe.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the set list that you all played for us, and I'd like to start with This Night. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about This Night?
Sure. This Night is a song from Wild Loneliness, which is a record that we made during lockdown, essentially, during the pandemic. And because of the rules and people not wanting to get sick, we recorded the album in my basement, one person at a time, essentially playing their parts. And This Night, the song is like, I don't remember exactly if I had this in my mind when I was writing it, but in retrospect now, it feels like it's about wanting to just like be able to just like go out and see a band and like have a night in a bar somewhere and not be stuck in the basement during a pandemic. But it's the first song on that record. It's one that we still play a lot.
It's not the first song on
Isn't
that
it?
record.
Oh no, you're right. City of the Dead, a song we never play, is the first song on that record.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And it's also that This Night, the recorded version is not. It's not that it's drastically different in an arrangement as it's played live now, but because we were recording in your basement and you were playing mostly acoustic guitar.
Yeah, I only played acoustic on that record.
And it was just sonically a very different track, and it also had what were the other instruments on there?
Well, on This
Was it a
Night,
violin?
there's some strings that were arranged by Owen Pallett.
Oh, wow.
Right.
And there's backing vocals from Tracy Ann Campbell, who's in Camera Obscura. The recorded version is very like lush, kind of acoustic, electric, indie rock, and then live it's more.
It's
like
evolved into a much more straight ahead rock song.
Yeah.
Right.
So this version is the rock version.
Yeah.
I want to ask you really quickly about that recording style that you had to do versus saying what you
It was
chose.
horrible.
Yeah. Why do you say that, Jim?
Oh no, I mean,
Jim would come over. I'd be like, "Your amp's already set up. The microphone's on it. You stand over there."
I would come in the back
wearing
door.
masks. I'm sitting over here with the laptop. Jim's over there playing his parts, like that.
Yeah,
and it was miserable.
I bet. But it sounds great.
It came out well.
It turned out surprisingly well.
Yeah. Can you talk to us about On the Floor?
On the Floor is a track from Wild Loneliness that is also about being on the floor of the basement where we were making the record and looking out the little slit windows at the weather, just thinking like, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could just go do whatever we wanted right now? Nope, we're inside.
What's it like to play a song like that now?
It's kind of fun. It's kind of cathartic
Yeah.
to play it.
I think it's redeeming in a
play
way.
it now. Yeah, I think that, well, like Jim was saying, the album versions are so different that when we play it now, it's kind of like it's like a new thing, and it's a more like energetic thing.
It sort of also feels like, wow, it would have been nice if we could have recorded this after playing it live a whole bunch, because, it's not that I love the recording, but it would be a different animal now after being, like having a life of it being played live over and over and over again, it would be a totally different song almost.
It would be. I mean, I think
even though we play it the exact same way, it just would have it would be less tentative, maybe.
when one unfulfilled concept was that when we made that record, knowing how we were making it and that I was playing acoustic guitar and everything, one idea was that, once we get to leave our homes and start touring again, like we should make another version of this record where it's like all the fully electric versions of these songs, but that just never happened. So,
Yeah.
But when people come see us live, they can hear what these songs sound like now. I mean, I don't want to second guess it because we got one band I listened to a lot during lockdown was REM. And speaking of Shaped by Sound, I mean, that's a band that, we've been listening to for 40 years now. Or more, actually. But anyway, we got Mike Mills to remotely add some backing vocals on the album version of On the Floor on the record. So maybe just like everyone being stuck at home gave us the idea that we could say like, hey, let's see if Mike Mills from REM will sing on our record. And then lo and behold, it came to pass. So
that's really cool.
There's
Silver lining.
Yeah, silver lining.
Yeah. What's it? I mean, for you, I mean, yeah, you're tapping into that, but like, what is that like to have like one of your heroes, be on your record? And you're just like, screw it, why not ask him?
It's wild.
It's surreal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird.
They're known to be nice people and very generous musicians. So it wasn't a total surprise, but it's still like kind of wild when I hear it.
Yeah, it's also wild for me to hear you say that because I would think, you all are just such a huge part of the scene too. And here I am listening to you all say, wow, like my heroes are playing on my record.
It's pretty cool.
We've met them, and but it's a different thing than having them, actually, perform
Right.
on something that you're creating.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a totally different. I'm having trouble describing it because it's somewhat undescribable. Yeah.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Learn to Surf. Actually, could you tell us a little bit about Learn to Surf?
That's an old song now. I remember when it was new. That sounds funny, but I mean, seriously, it's like old now.
We kind of took a hiatus from making new records for like 8 years, and then Learn to Surf is a song that was on the first album we made when we started making records again in 2010. And so, yeah, it's a newer song for us, but that's 14 years old. But that's a song that I really like playing, and we always get a good reaction from crowds, I feel like, when we play that song. And so, again, like any song that we have from a record that's that recent, to me, feels like awesome when crowds want to hear those songs, not just like our old songs,
Yeah. Within Learn to Surf, can you kind of speak to a little bit about the tone, the mentality of it? It seems to me like it's like a damn the torpedoes, go after it, learn the new thing, and just jump in. Is that kind of what you were going for?
I think so. Yeah, and I think it's the record that Learn to Surf is on is called Majesty Shredding, and I feel like the whole vibe of that record is like post hiatus for us, but also post Bush years in America, and maybe some reasons for optimism.
Can you talk to us about Package Thief?
Package Thief is a really old song.
I can't remember where that came from.
You don't?
Yeah.
That came from Package Thief.
I mean, I know the story about the lyrics.
Yeah.
More, which you should speak to because it's interesting or funny. But the music, I was like, I have no recollection of
writing it?
of practicing, of ever. I mean, it just always seems to have always existed in a way. Like
Yeah.
I don't remember a time when it didn't exist or something.
Yeah, I don't remember learning the music either, but the song is kind of just one of those songs about daily life and like living in a small town, a small neighborhood in a small town, and characters that you talk to as you're just like walking through the neighborhood, like, you know, old ladies sitting on their front porches just kind of saying funny stuff, and people complaining about packages getting stolen off their porch. And then you're kind of like, you don't really know these people all that well, so you kind of invent like a backstory to the kind of crazy stuff they're saying to you. Know?
And is this the video that was featured on Beavis and Butthead?
Yeah. Yes.
Peyton Reed made a video for this song that features marionettes that look like us. They're pretty realistic. They look like us. And it was played on Beavis and Butthead, and I guess part of the gag in that episode is that they're arguing about whether we're puppets or not, right?
I never saw it, but that's my understanding.
I don't remember.
Or he says, I think these guys, I think they're puppets. I don't think they're real people. And it's obvious that, yeah.
So
it's cartoon characters commenting on the veracity of the existence of puppets versus real people in a band. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a funny video even without that, and then that added another layer of comedy.
Yeah. What's for you all, like, were you like, holy smokes, we made it to Beavis and Butthead? Like at that time? Like, I feel like it was a huge thing. I don't know. I mean,
It was a proud moment.
Yeah.
Very proud. But like I said, I never saw, I don't have any memory of seeing it.
I think the cultural
the
import
show.
of Beavis and Butthead was lost on me a little bit at the time because it wasn't something that I watched regularly, even though I thought it was funny when I did see it, it just wasn't like on my agenda.
Right.
But I know that a lot of people saw that video only because it was on Beavis and Butthead.
Right.
What about Water Wings?
So this is the 30th anniversary of Foolish, and so we've been playing Water Wings a lot on recent tours, and it's a fun song. It was never like a single or anything, but I think people really like this song. The lyrics, I don't really know. It's a little bit just about Greg Cartwright from the Raining Sound. He's been in different bands. He now has a band called the Hypos. They're from Asheville. He had this quote, and he's been in bands for a long time. He's like our age. He had this great quote in an interview where he was talking about listening to the lyrics from the records by like his earlier bands, like a band called the Oblivions that he was in. They still exist, I guess. And he said, those are songs from like when you're mad, but you don't realize that it's all like everything is your fault.
Yeah.
You haven't realized yet that everything that you're mad about is your fault.
Yeah.
And I think Water Wings is kind of like that, just like youthful, like complaining. I don't know.
Yeah.
Grievance.
Yeah.
It's just you being 20 years old and being mad at a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Low F. Can you talk to us a little bit about Low F?
Low F is, I don't know, Jim, what do you think about, you're a big proponent of Low F.
I love the song. I like the music. I like the lyrics, but I can really only speak about the music. I'm always wondering when we play it what it's about, because I think I know, but I'm afraid to ask.
Well,
Does it have anything to do with New York City?
No.
It doesn't. I always thought it was about somebody's apartment, low F being
Interesting.
the letter F on an apartment door.
No, Low F is like
The actual musical thing?
the note.
The chord? Okay.
And my guitar, the the E string is tuned to a low F.
Yeah, I know that. And I thought, I just thought that was sort of like
it's a happy accident,
not an accident, like not a synergy.
I don't know, what would you?
I don't know what you would call. Anyway, I'm wrong. It doesn't matter.
It's just it's a gimmick. It's a songwriting gimmick to tune the guitar to low F. Low F is on a record called "I Hate Music," a lot of which was written in the wake of the death of a close friend of ours and lots of other friends of ours who knew this person. And so low F is just kind of like about being down, basically. And it's in a weird tuning. Like I said, the E string is a low F. And so it sounds, I think, more interesting for the weird tuning that it's in. But it's also harder to play because you have to retune the guitar if you're going to play it. And I think we didn't play it for a long time or didn't play it very often. Mm-hmm. But when we do, people react to it, and I think it is fun to play. So we've been playing it more often. But even though it's on that record, I Hate Music, which has been out for oh my gosh, 10 years now, 11 years, we didn't play it all that often, but we play it more now.
Yeah. And Jim loves it so much.
Yeah. So it's all about me.
Yeah, Jim's a proponent.
But,
I appreciate that.
But I mean,
I'm just being lazy that I don't want to have to retune my guitar.
Whenever there's like any kind of band announcement on Instagram or any social media, we get a lot, like, oh, play low F when you're in Cincinnati, or play low F when you're where, like.
It has a following.
It's remarkable. Yeah. It's remarkable to me that many people will name check the song.
Mm. That's really cool. Do you all like look for that kind of stuff? Like people asking for songs and thinking about it?
I think we pay attention to it because that's who's coming to see you. It would be weird if you didn't. I guess.
Yeah. I can say it is a great treat whenever you blindly reached out to somebody you follow on Instagram and say, hey, like, this is my favorite song. And then they play it. And it's like one of the coolest things of all time.
Can you talk to us a little bit about Hello Hawk?
Hello Hawk is kind of about New York City.
Mm. Yeah.
But it's kind of, I don't know. It's one of those songs, a lot of our songs, they're not really about one thing or another thing, they're just kind of slightly stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
I think this falls into that, though sometimes in retrospect you go like, oh, it's kind of about that. Like I think it's kind of about being in one place and wishing you were somewhere else, but not having the wherewithal to like actually leave where you are, and just wishing you could just be transported somewhere else, without having to go through everything that would require of you. But it's one of the few songs we play from the Come Pick Me Up record. And it was a single from that record. And that record has a lot of interesting like arrangements that Jim O'Rourke, who produced it, did, strings and horns and things like that, which we don't have with us when we play live. And even though this song on the album does have strings and horns, including former Raleigh resident Jeb Bishop, who was in some local bands around here like Stillborn Christians and Angels of Epistemology and Egg. He plays trombone. He's a trombonist. There's a lot of stuff going on this song on the record, but live it also works as just a stripped down like rock song. So we play it pretty often.
When I always think about it when we're playing it, because that record, Come Pick Me Up, when it came out, a local critic in The Spectator or The Independent reviewed the record, and their criticism of the record was that Superchunk is playing too many notes. What? Which is a quote from Amadeus about Mozart or something. It's I'm not equating. I'm just saying I'm not even saying that it was lazy criticism, because maybe I was like, that was a time of the band when we were like writing songs together. So like we'd gotten it down, not to a science, but we were pretty good at it for a while there, where where we would jam, and and that kind of created denser textures and weirder arrangements and more notes, So
It does have a lot of notes in it, I'm not going to lie.
I mean, I play a lot of notes. There's like a push me, pull me, like everyone, like it's, it's not all just like, it's each instrument seems to be kind of playing its own track.
Right.
In a way.
I can't imagine getting that criticism now, especially with I feel like jam band music is just huge now. Like, can you imagine? I don't know. Did you have a criticism of you're playing too many notes?
I thought it was cute. Yeah. It didn't really affect me, but I remembered it.
Right. Yeah. And now every time you play that one too.
But it goes through my head every time, just about. So
I'm gonna play the crap out of these notes.
I got to remember where they all go. In what order.
Can you talk to us about Driveway to Driveway?
Driveway to Driveway is a song that we play pretty much every night when we play because people love this song.
This is one of those songs that as soon as you start it, you can tell that the room has changed.
Right.
And that people are like,
which is really fun.
They're paying attention.
Yeah.
Maybe they're no longer talking to the person behind them, kind of thing.
They save that for the song after.
Mm-hmm.
It's a song from Foolish, which is 30 years old, and it's a song that our friends Phil Morrison and Peyton Reed collaborated on a music video. They collaborated on 2 music videos. In my mind, we made both videos in like 3 days total.
It was like one weekend and then the next weekend.
Okay. So the first part, which is another song from Foolish, and Driveway to Driveway. And the Driveway to Driveway video is supposed to look like a
Preston Sturges.
like a Preston Sturges, like a movie like The Philadelphia Story.
Yep.
40s screwball romantic comedy kind of thing. Though it's not that funny, to be honest. Sorry, Peyton. But the video it did turn out great. And it features at one point Phil Morrison in a dress as a body double for Laura Balance in order to achieve a certain video effect. Anyway, we filmed that in Chapel Hill. And there's lots of extras in the video that are friends of ours and people in other bands and stuff like that who we recruited to be in the video. So it's pretty fun to watch it from that standpoint. Yeah. It's fun to play.
Who else in the video that we could pick out besides yourselves, obviously?
Tom Maxwell.
That's right. Tom Maxwell just wrote a book about the scene.
That comes.
Phil Collins from the band Satellite Boyfriend is in the video. Colin Dodd, I think he worked on the video. I can't remember if he's in it.
I don't know. Amy Ruth Buchanan, Liz Sloan.
Claire Ashby, who was also in the Angels of Epistemology.
Ben Barwick is in it.
Yeah.
And maybe Jennifer Walker. Jennifer Barwick.
From the Ashley Stove and Erectus Monotone. Yeah.
It's, I haven't really looked at it in years.
I don't know if you have to slow it down to see all these people or what. I can't remember.
It must have been really fun making that video. Or, I don't know, it seems like you were just with your friends, just hanging out and just being creative.
It's not fun making videos.
No. It might have been fun for that. It might have been fun for the extras. We had a lot of stuff to do, then we'd have to do it over and over again. So.
And when you're not doing stuff, you're sitting around waiting to do stuff. And that takes even more time.
Yeah.
It's a lot of boredom.
And you're also aware that everyone who's working on it, camera people and grips and whoever else is doing stuff, they're all basically working for free.
Yeah.
And so
generous.
The schedule can be punishing, but we're getting a video out of this. They're just kind of doing it out of the goodness of their heart because it's kind of fun to collaborate on these things or whatever. So there's also that aspect of it when you're sitting around just going no one's getting paid.
You feel,
Right.
So you feel almost guilty.
Yeah, they don't want to be here for this. Yeah. As far as kind kind of the intention of the song? Can you maybe speak to that a little bit, or what you were thinking when you wrote it?
It's just kind of like a blurry reminiscence of like a music festival.
Just trying to recount maybe what happened and whether it was for good or for bad, or
Yeah, or just more that feeling of like not really totally understanding what happened, because like the last 36 hours were just kind of a blur, but trying to figure it out.
yeah. Have you had that before? That recollection before that, or trying to recollect something like that before?
I mean, I certainly did when I was writing the song, I guess.
Yeah.
But I will say, just to clarify, the driving in the song is in golf carts. A lot of people don't know that. Because when you're at a music festival, you sometimes, like, the only way to get around is, like, from one place to another is in, like, a little golf cart.
Right, like a little people mover.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about What a Time to Be Alive?
The title track from What a Time to Be Alive is a song that I'm hoping will not maintain its relevance, or its, what's the word I'm looking for? Pertinence?
Pertinence, yeah.
Forever. But it was part of a record that was kind of written in the aftermath of the 2016 election, and just trying to like wrap our heads around the fact that at least half of this country will vote for like an obvious fascist to be president. And, we're back in this same situation where he's making it, this one candidate is making it clear every day that he's a huge racist. He's an authoritarian. He wants to be a dictator, and half the country's like, I don't know, like sounds all right. That's a tough place to be, and here we are. But that's basically what this song is about.
Yeah. Is it sort of just, yeah.
How
ironic,
for
huh?
some reason like white grievance is still something that like drives half the people in the country to make decisions.
What a Time to Be Alive, huh?
Yeah.
Hyper Enough. Can you talk to us about that?
Hyper Enough is about a whole other music festival. And Hyper Enough is from Here's Where the Strings Come In. And that's a fun song to play as well, because that was a song that we did have a video for it. Norwood Cheek made a great video for this song. And I feel like, again, maybe just because there's that video, like a lot of people knew this song. It was one of our only songs that ever got played on like modern rock radio, which was like kind of a big thing in the 90s, like a format that you could try to get your song played on the radio. We wouldn't bother today, but we did then. Our friend Karen Glauber, who works in that world, like helped get this song on the radio. So, it's funny, the things that you're doing at the time, and you're like, is this really worth it? But then later you're like, oh yeah, there's a reason that everyone knows this song more than all our other songs, because like it was on the radio, and radio means something.
Right.
So yeah, it's just, again, it's just a little bit about like being in a crazy situation, like a music festival, when like people are losing their minds. Maybe some people are doing some illicit substances, and you're kind of just like spectating and wanting to like keep a distance from it, but also it's kind of fascinating,
Yeah. And maybe be a part of it? Or just be away from
Not
it?
so much. I mean, I think that's more what the song is about, is like, I don't really need to be involved in that, but it's kind of like funny to be around you people.
So that's all I really have for you right now. I guess my last question would be, is there anything else that you'd like to speak to?
It's been fun working on new songs, which we've been doing. And by the time this comes out, I think maybe people will be able to hear even more of those. So
That's exciting.
Yeah.
What's sort of the timetable for that release? Do you know yet?
we don't exactly know, because we've recorded a bunch of songs and they're not they're not done being mixed yet, and we may record a couple more. So sometime next year, hopefully there'll be more new stuff out there.
Yeah. And is it going to be recorded in your basement this time again, or no?
Not recording in my basement. No. We're not in a rush to put out a new record because then we'll start touring again. So just going to, work on these new songs and make sure that the next album is something that we want it to be. And then hopefully maybe towards the end of 2025 have a new record.
And for us, that's pretty, that's pretty an extensive future mapped out. We're pretty, take each day as it comes, So we never have a grand master plan.
Yeah, sure. Has that always been the approach as well?
Yeah, and we've never like sat down and had, fill out a vision board or anything like that.
I've tried to get Jim to fill out a vision board so many times, and he's never taken the
Nope.
bait, so.
I mean, we're all, we're all in this together, but who knows what the future can bring?
Yeah.
It's like,
Mac, how many vision boards do you have?
I mean, I've got a closet full.
And you save them?
But I save them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could just take a picture and then dry erase, but I just get a new one. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
thank you.
It's truly an honor to have you all here, and we're really excited that you came.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Thanks for joining us on the Shaped by Sound podcast. If you'd like to hear some of the songs we discussed today, you can find them on our website at pbsnc.org/Shaped by Sound. Or find us on the PBS North Carolina YouTube page. Thanks for listening.